Sandy, let's start. I'm happy to have met you a long time ago. I think we met in 2014, and we have met through Open World program. And you have been to Moldova, invited by me. You stayed in my own house, and we have celebrated entrepreneurship and creatives even then. But I know you as a person that supports entrepreneurs through IBM's program, social entrepreneurship program. But can you let us know about that a little bit more before we go and dive into presentation skills? And what should we know about presentation?
Okay. Well, I have been working out at IBM for many years in marketing. And through marketing, I've worked with many of our customers and business partners, helping them be successful in their businesses. I've given a lot of presentations at work. I wish I learned how to do it better sooner. So congratulations to you for learning right up front before you begin your work career. You will, I'm certain, at some point be giving presentations at work, sales presentations or team status presentations. So it's a very good skill to have, or at least have some level of comfort speaking, whether it's online or in person. So that's what we'll be covering today. I'm also very active in Toastmasters. Toastmasters is an international organization dedicated to teaching public speaking. It's almost 100 years old. In 2 more years, they will be 100 years old. They're in close to 150 countries around the world. There are Toastmaster meetings in Chisinau, I know, and maybe other places now within Moldova. But anyway, they're all over the world, and it's just local clubs, local teams meeting on a regular basis to simply practice public speaking. We'll use it as a way to develop those skills, which they will then use in their job or other areas of their life, their own business. That's a good place to get some good practice. You are wanting to do more practice around public speaking. So throughout my presentation, I'll stop every once in a while and see if there are any questions. I'm happy to take questions along the way, so just make a note of them, and like I said, I'll stop and review whatever information we need to.
Great. That was my question. How do we go about it? Are we going to stop, or are we writing them down in the chat?
Yeah, capture them. It's a good place. Capture them in the chat, and then we'll stop every once in a while and make sure we've got all the questions answered. I'm gonna just share my screen for just a moment here. Okay. So you're seeing my PowerPoint?
Yeah, we can go full mode. I think it's on mine usually is F5, but we can see it quite well as well.
Okay, super. Okay, and just to confirm, we are finishing at, I think it's 7:23 there, so we're finishing at 8:30. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
All right. Okay. Well, very good. Well, let me just zip through real quick a couple of things that I want to make sure that we cover well today. So here's my objectives. Number one is to help you increase your confidence being in front of an audience. Having the confidence to be able to stand up, or like we see today, Sakari, I'm probably not saying your name correct, but anyway, you are a moderator today, and so that's a great role. And all of these, developing all these public speaking skills helps in any of that type of presentation. So we'll definitely be hoping to increase your confidence today that you know a little bit more about what you're doing with public speaking. And then capturing, I'm going to go through some areas to help you capture your audience's attention right up front, and then hopefully keep it throughout your presentation. We're going to talk about choosing the right words to have value and impact. And this is even most important right up front, again, in your speech. We'll talk a lot about that introduction, those first few minutes of your presentation or your speech, and capturing that audience, keeping them engaged. And then using your body and your voice to convey an even stronger message. We'll go through some gestures and some vocal variety, what you need to do to just sometimes make your speech more interesting or more impactful. Two halves of public speaking for me are creating and delivering. So we're going to be going through how to create or develop your presentation, and then we're going to be talking about how to deliver it. As two separate skills, two separate areas that we're going to cover today. I'm going to stop sharing here. Okay. Okay, so we're going to start with create the presentation. Most speeches or presentations that you give are going to follow a regular pattern of an opening, and then a body, and then a conclusion. It's somewhat, if you've heard it said before, the old, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. And that's three basic parts to any presentation. Whether it's an education presentation, and you're going to, like today's presentation, or if it's more of a story, you still have some sort of introduction or opening to your story, and then the body of the story, and some sort of wrap up at the end. Having a very well-organized speech like this makes it very easy, or more easy, for the audience to follow along and better identify where you're ending one point and moving on to the next point. So let's talk about the introduction for a moment. The introduction is where you can really capture your audience, or you can lose your audience. Kind of the first impression is a lasting impression. So that first 30 to 60 seconds of your presentation has to have a lot of care put into it and a lot of impact. It's recommended that you start out with something to capture that audience attention, something like a startling question or a quote or a story. I'll give some examples of these. Could be a very surprising fact. Sometimes you can even use a prop. You hold up something and your audience is intrigued by it. They want to know what is that all about? So they want to hear more. And then, as always, throughout your whole presentation, but especially when you get started, use energy, make it powerful. Don't apologize up front. Don't start out with an apology that will weaken your whole presentation. If you're a few minutes late, or if it's too warm, or you had technical difficulties, whatever it is, hey, come in, we're starting now, let's go. Energy, energy, no apologies. Just move on, move forward. You can start out with a joke or a story, but don't start out with a joke or a story unless it pertains to your topic. It often does not work so well. If I had started out with a joke about the weather, for example, and then, okay, that's left, and then I have to transition into whatever it is I'm talking about, you could lose your audience during that transition. So best, if you're going to start with a story, make sure that it's part of your introduction to the content that you're going to be talking about. Let me give you some examples of some of these. Oh, well, one other don't do. Don't open with a question that's very obvious. It'll sound cheesy. For example, if I said, who here wants to be successful? Well, obviously everybody wants to be successful. So don't open with what's called a trite question like that. Let me give you some good examples. If you were going to do a presentation on water purification, the importance of water purification, maybe this is for a job that you have, or maybe it's just to your community. You're concerned with the water in your community. You could open by saying something like, well, let me do the don't first. Don't open with saying, today I'm going to tell you why water purification is so important. You've already put them to sleep. And don't use one of those trite questions like, did you ever stop to think about what's in your tap water? Well, probably nobody has, so skip it, move on. But you can start with an interesting question like, and here's where you could even use a prop, hold up a glass of water. Did you ever, did you know that the average glass of water has over 10 million bacteria? That's a shocking statement and can hopefully grab your audience's attention, and they want to know, what? No, not my tap water. So you can start out with one of those surprising facts and then go into telling your story. Or you could start out with a story maybe about a school and the students all got sick because of the drinking water. So that's a story to start with to emphasize your points about the importance of water purification. Those are just some examples of that opening. I'll give you some links as references at the end. I'll give them to Alicia and she can send them out to you. But I was finding a couple of links last night. If you're familiar with TED Talks, TED Talks, TED Talks are online. They're 15 to 20 minute short presentations given through this organization called TED. TED stands for Technology, Entertainment, and Design. And they wanted to give a place for people to give short presentations about everything, about whatever, about water purification, there's psychology presentations, this is just everything, every kind of topic out there. If you go out to YouTube and search on TED, you'll find a ton of stuff out there. But anyway, here's two of them that I found out there that had very interesting opening statements. The first one was attention getting. He said, I want to discuss with you why you are going to fail to have a great career. Wow, that's a somewhat shocking statement. What do you mean I'm going to fail to have a great career? Tell me more. And then another one was starting with a story. So the gentleman said, imagine being in an airplane, climbing to 10,000 feet. You hear an explosion, and then clack, 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 clack. That is what I heard when I stared out the window from seat 7A. Oh, that's a somewhat shocking story. Great way to start the presentation. Now everyone wants to know what happened next. So that's two really good examples of some opening statements that are very attention-getting. So that's the opening of your presentation. The next part is the body of your presentation. So this is where if it's an education speech in particular, this is where the meat is going to be. Most listeners, we talk about the magic of 3. Most listeners are only going to remember 3 to 5 points. So if you start now saying, here, let me tell you 10 very important things about water purification. They might remember the first couple, or if there were a couple toward the end that they found interesting, maybe they'll remember those, but they're not going to remember all 10. So best to try to either pick the three most important points or somehow group them into 3 groups, something so that they can remember it more easily, and it helps have a cleaner organization to your presentation. Each one of these points could be supported with stories, quotes, facts, visual aids, whatever is going to be the content, the meat of your presentation. If you're using any stories, quotes, facts, be sure to always give the source of that. So for example, in the opening that I gave of, did you know that there's, in every glass of water, there's 10 billion bacteria? Whatever my number was. Anyway, you would want to make sure to reference where that came from. So it came from the government report or whatever, the water system reporting. So be sure to, if you're going to use facts in any presentation, always tell people where it's coming from. Or if you're going to give a quote, then tell who said that quote. Whether it's a quote from Albert Einstein, or if it's a quote from a professor at some university, tell who it is. And then the conclusion, to wrap up your presentation, is again an opportunity to convey those main points and help the audience remember what is that main message that you want them to go away with. You can either go back through your main points, quickly summarize them, and that would be appropriate in an education speech. I'll be doing that at the end of this presentation. But if it's a motivational speech or an inspirational speech, maybe it's something you're giving at a dinner meeting, for example, and you're the motivational speaker. Probably you don't necessarily may not feel the need to summarize everything that you just said, but what was that key message? What was that motivating message that you want to leave with them? And that's what you want to take time to emphasize again at the end. So your conclusion or your closing can be a time to emphasize that main point or that action that you're wanting them to take. So remember, get out there and vote, or whatever it is was the message of your presentation. Let me stop there. I've done a lot of talking. So let me stop there and see if there's any questions on organizing your speech, the introduction, the body, the closing. Anything coming through?
Personally, I have any questions. I don't have any questions.
Okay, great. Then I will move on to the next topic, which is going to be
everything is clear.
Finding
I
the
hope
right...
for
all good.
No, I want to say that everything is clear, and I hope is clear for everybody.
Okay, so let's talk about the language that you use, the words that you use in your presentation. Preferably, you want to be using very clear, very simple words. We'll talk about having very vivid words, a lot of imagery so people can be picturing what you're saying, particularly if you're giving a story. Need to mute, Amelia, I think. Okay. Thanks. Yes, so use clear, forceful words to make your message more interesting. And try to be specific when you can. For example, let me give you another statement, and then a way to make it better. So if you're giving a presentation at work and you say, this proposal will result in more money for our business. Okay, that's the message you want to get across. If you can be more specific, it'll have more impact. So better would be, this proposal will boost our annual revenue by $800,000, enabling us to invest in additional research going into next year. Is that more compelling than simply, it'll result in more money for our business? The more specific you can be, the more impact your statement can have. Sometimes you have to be careful with your choice of words. For example, if I was talking about a restaurant and I said, the restaurant serves cheap food. In English, anyways, cheap can have a lot of different meanings. In some context, that could be a good thing. You're going to save some money. Or it could mean cheap food, meaning poor, low quality, poor food. So you want to be very clear on your word choice when you're using adjectives like that. Another way to make your story more colorful is to give names to people and places. If you're talking about something that happened at the holidays and you say, my aunt brought her famous apple pie. Just something very simple like naming your aunt. My Aunt Melly brought her amazing, famous apple pie. Giving people in your stories names makes for a more colorful story. Instead of just saying, my friends went out. My friends and I went out drinking one night, and we got into a bit of trouble. It's more colorful to say, to name your buddies. So if I said, oh, my buddies and I, Bristol, Smithy, and Belch, instead of just saying my buddies. So clearly you have nicknames for your buddies. It gives them more personality. It gives them more character. It makes for a more colorful story of these three buddies that went out partying with you one night. If you've ever seen the movie Castaway with Tom Hanks, it was a few years ago. I don't know how many people will remember that, but in it, he makes friends with I think it was a volleyball, a white ball. But it was an important part of that story, and they named it. And he named it Wilson, because it had the word Wilson on it. Anyway, that became a very famous name. He could have just, in that movie, they could have just had it been a ball, but by naming it, it gave it character. It gave it somehow, that ball had personality because it had a name. So give your characters names. All right, let's talk about being very vivid with your descriptions. It's great to give vivid details to your story. I'm going to do this by giving you a statement, and then I'll give you a better statement, and then I'll give you an even better, or what I call the best statement, to continue to add more imagery to the statement. If I said, as a kid, I took piano lessons from a boring teacher, would be the start of an interesting story. As a kid, I took piano lessons from a boring teacher. Let's make it a little more interesting. As a kid, my mom made me take piano lessons from this old fat man. A 30-minute lesson seemed to take hours. Now you have a little bit more visual of these piano lessons. And even better, as a child, let's see. As a child, I took piano lessons from this old, overweight, sweating man. The minutes seemed like hours in my lesson as I watched his long fingers running scales up and down the piano. Now you have even more visual of sitting next to this man doing these boring piano lessons. So you can really add a lot of color to your stories that way. Anytime you're talking about, well, the sun, this morning the sun came up, it was beautiful. Add some more imagery to that. The sun rose up and the colors started developing. There were the sky filled with beautiful orange and red colors. Help people see that sunset more. All right. There's something called rhetorical devices. Rhetorical devices are things like metaphors and similes. Anytime you say something like the bed was hard as a rock, so simile, hard as a rock, or the piano lessons were easy as pie. There's a country song. He was as cool as the flip side of my pillow. You can use these rhetorical devices, metaphors and similes, where you say something is like something, or it's as hot as something. The pavement was so hot you could fry an egg on it. Just gives more color, more interest than just saying the pavement was hot. If you're going to be describing something going on at the holidays, you could say, I love going to my grandmother's house because she was a great cook. But then you could make that a little more interesting, get a more vivid image of your grandmother. You could say something like, I loved going to my grandmother's at the holidays. You walked into the house and you could smell her double chocolate cake baking away in the oven, and it smelled delicious, made me hungry. You can just elaborate more on, instead of just having simpler statements. All right, if there's no, let me just stop and see if there's questions, because I'm going to jump over to delivering the presentation.
I have a question. What would happen if we don't use these tactics, like we don't be specific? We lose our audience?
Okay, so what will happen if you're not as specific? Is that the question?
Yes.
If you have a less specific statement? Yeah. Okay, so the example I gave on that was talking about this proposal will result in more money for your business. You could tell somebody that if you're trying to convince them to adopt your proposal, some project you're working on, this proposal will result in more money for your business. But if you can be more specific, it'll be more impactful, and maybe it'll help you get the business. So in my example, I said this proposal will boost our annual revenue, boost your annual revenue by $800,000, enabling you to invest in additional research going into next year. So be more specific if you want to have a more impactful statement.
What if we use like this kind of expressions with a more serious audience, such as the president, by an example? Are we allowed to?
If you're presenting to somebody, a high-level person, like the president, president of a company or president of the of the country, Well, if you're going to be doing that, I hope you practice to present to them. But go ahead.
No, I mean, can we use this kind of, funny expressions and, giving more color to the presentation with such a serious ambience?
Yep. Well, you need to think about the purpose of your presentation. If your purpose is to entertain, if you're the after dinner speaker, even if it's a room full of very important people, then your goal, what you're to be doing is to be entertaining or motivating. Maybe you're doing some very inspiring speech. Maybe you're doing something at your church, for example. And so in that case, yeah, you would want to be very vivid in your language. You'd want to add more color, and it would make it more interesting, more entertaining, perhaps more inspiring. If you're giving a business presentation, like if you're in the case where you're talking about the importance of water purification for our city, for example, then you're going to be more factual, more fact-based. So there's an example where you would want to be more specific. Instead of just saying this product or this process will make our water cleaner, you're going to want to be more specific on that. You're going to want to come with your facts lined up. You're going to want to source those facts that I talked about. So you want to be able to say to those leaders, here are some of the problems in our city with our water. Here's our proposal to make it better. We've run some tests, and give as much specifics as you can. So in a case like that, where you're doing more of a business presentation, then you want to be more factual. However, if you want to convince them that they need to do something about the water problem, if you open up with a story, you can be very vivid in that story about what happened at that school where all the children got sick suddenly because the water was so bad and they all had to go home, and 53 of them ended up in the hospital and whatever. You want to add more. In that case, you want to add a little bit more emotion to it to get people to say, oh, this is bad. We need to fix this.
Yeah, I also have
The fact. What's that?
I have a question. Can we ask or tell something sad or that will make people feel guilty? Like maybe if I speak about ecology and I want to say that like we have a really important problem in our country, and to give some facts that makes like people that listen me to feel guilty, is okay or not?
To make them feel guilty. That might be a strategy. Back to my example of the water purification. If you're trying to get them to take action on this poor quality water, explaining how children ended up in the hospital because of the bad water, and it was because the city council decided not to spend money on the new water purification system. And so, I don't know, I guess it would depend on your specific audience, but you, maybe more than make them feel guilty, you want to stir them with emotion. Sometimes you can convince people because of facts, but other times you need that story. You need the disabled, the child with a disability, or you need something that kind of pulls at their heartstrings a little bit, and makes it so it's not just fact-based, but you're stirring them emotionally in order to get a response and getting them to take action.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. There was a great example of in the US, there was a public TV station, and they were they needed more funding in order to stay on the air. And it was, they did a lot of children's programs on this public TV program, but they were going to have to go off the air if they didn't get more funding. So they went to Congress in Washington and said, here's why we need more funding. And they had a lot of facts and showing how students everywhere were watching these programs and they were learning how to read. And it was a wonderful TV network. And the last person to come up and speak was Mr. Rogers, the gentleman, Fred Rogers, who did the show Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, which was a kids show back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and he did it for a long time. And he had a very successful show. He got up there, and he was very soft-spoken, and he talked about the children that he worked with, and the children that came to him, told him how important it was that they learned these wonderful things from his TV show. He didn't have facts and figures. He had all emotion, and he had stories of the children that he had helped over the years. And that was the presentation that clinched it, and they got their money. But it was Fred Rogers up there giving more of an emotional plea after the previous speakers had already brought the facts and figures. And then he kind of put it all, tipped the scales by his emotional stories. Sometimes you need both. Okay, let's move on to delivering the presentation. So now you've sat down, you've written your presentation, you've got your facts and figures in there, you've got an idea for a nice opening. It's going to be a story or a surprising fact. You've got all your supporting arguments, and you're going to wrap it up at the end with whatever, another emotional story or something. So it's all organized, and you've thought about what words you're going to use. Now you've got to stand up and actually deliver it. So delivery is the second half. Delivery is a lot about body language. Body language can communicate confidence. You can emphasize points with your delivery. If you're delivering, and I'll talk a little bit about online versus live. So if you're presenting live and you're up on a stage or in front of a room, maybe you're in front of a whiteboard, then you want to make sure that you are using some of your space. So it's okay to move around. And you want to use big full gestures with your arms. If you're talking about the moon, you want to point to the moon. They say to try to keep your gestures within this space, like down to your waist and just above your head. So maybe if you were giving a really entertaining, crazy story, then you'd be all over the place and doing cartwheels and having even more. But if you're giving more of a presentation, like a business presentation, you want to keep your gestures within a few feet of your face. So you want them to be focused on your face. And as you have more practice, it's hard to just teach this without being able to stand up and have you practice, but you do want to practice. You'll get more confidence using your space, looking at the audience, having eye contact with not just one person, but talking to the people over on the right side of the room and on the left side of the room, so that you're including everybody. Again, a lot of that's going to come with practice. If you are online, if you're giving a formal presentation online, then you want to, number one, you want to be real aware of your background. Not too busy. I purposely don't have a lot hanging up on my walls because if I'm using this room to do presentations, and I try to be aware of what I have on the table behind me here. If I had a bunch of boxes or books or whatever, maybe that's not such a good background. So I try to keep the background clean. If you have just a plain wall, that's even better. And you want to be back enough, preferably standing up, but back enough so that the top of your head is almost to the top of the screen, but you've got a little bit of space up there, and down to about your waist. That's a good area to give a presentation, so that when you're talking with your hands, they can see your hands. I'm up closer like I am today. You just occasionally get a flash of fingers. Not so nice for a formal presentation. So preferably you want to be back a little ways from your computer. So just a couple of tips of when you're presenting online. Your gestures, again, should be in this area. And I use the word deliberate. Your gestures should be deliberate, meaning you're not just talking with your hands and you're all over the place, or you have a particular motion where you just are always doing this over and over again. If you haven't presented before, maybe you don't even realize you need somebody giving you feedback on what you're doing and what you look like, or videotape yourself, because you don't even realize some of these little habits that you have. One of the very first times I got up to give a speech at Toastmasters, I gave what I thought was a really good speech. I was very excited about it, sat back down, and we always have evaluators give us feedback. So my evaluator said, "Andy, you rock." And I thought, oh, good, I rock. Yay, that's a good thing. And she said, no, you rock. I was standing up in the front of the room and I was rocking up on my toes the whole time. Never knew it, never realized it. I had no idea what I was doing. And I thought, that's weird. I don't know that. I didn't know if I really believed her. The next time I got up to give a speech, I started to talk, and all of a sudden I realized, oh my gosh, she was right. Here I am. I'm rocking again. Didn't even ever know that was a habit that I had. Once I recognized it, then I could stop it. Same thing with filler words that are a habit. If you have a particular word, it's real easy to have a lot of ums and uhs, you knows, likes. If you've never listened to yourself, watched yourself on recording, you may not even realize how much of those filler words you have. So it's a good thing to have other people listen to you or record yourself so that you can hear what some of your filler words, your favorite filler words, as I say, are. Nearly everybody has them, unless you have done a lot of speaking and paying attention to that. So we'll come back to that when we talk about voice. So by deliberate, I started talking about deliberate. When you are giving a deliberate gesture, if you're talking about, we'll go back to your Aunt Mellie's amazing apple pie. If you wanted to give a gesture, it might be your hands in front of you. My Aunt Mellie's amazing apple pie. It smelled so good. You want to have a very deliberate gesture, and you can plan that into your speech. So when I talk about Aunt Mellie's pie, my hands come up. I can smell that wonderful apple pie. It can be a very deliberate gesture instead of just a random gesture. Just like you plan very carefully what words you want to use in your presentation, you can plan very carefully what gestures you use in your presentation. I gave an example earlier. If you're talking about the moon, you can point to the moon, or you talk about the sunrise. So you can do some obvious movements. You can plan them into your speech. And then you may still have some that are more just the random movements. But it's good to have movement, especially if you're live in front of an audience. You don't want to just put your hands in your pockets and stand in one place. You should avoid fidgeting. When I speak, I have to have nothing in my hand. If I walk up there with a pen in my hand, I'm going to play with the pen the whole time. If you have change in your pocket, get out of your pocket before you get up there to give your presentation so that you're not tempted to put your hand in your pocket and jingle your change. Anything like that. Hair, that's a big one. You ever have watched a presentation where somebody's just constantly fussing with their hair the whole time? It's really annoying, whether it's online or in person. No fidgeting with your hair, no fidgeting with your pockets. Keep your hands out. If you have to hold something, like if you have papers, then that's fine. But try not to have anything extra that's not needed in your hands. If you're telling a story and you have a dialogue between two people, in your presentation, it's almost as though you are acting it out. So you can talk about how you had this conversation with your Aunt Millie, and then she turned around and she said to me, so you can physically be the characters that you're talking about in your story. And that adds, makes it for a more interesting story. All right, let's talk about your voice. Vocal variety. A lively, exciting voice can help keep your audience's attention. I'm going to give you the link to a presentation online. It's a 7-minute presentation by a gentleman named Dhananjaya. To me, it is just a perfect presentation. He has a really clear opening. He has a small prop, grabs your attention right away. He tells a story that has several parts to it. And his gestures and his voice are all very deliberate. There's a part of the story where he talks about he was in jail, and his mother came to see him in jail, and she was holding the bars of the jail, talking to him. It was very deliberate gesture there, and you could just visualize this mother. She was holding the bars of the jail, and he said a tear ran down her cheek, and he does a little woo. You could just see that whole scene taking place. You could see him and you could see her as he was describing this. And a lot of it was the voice that he was using. It was very emotional. And he was holding the bars. So I encourage you to take a look at that. It's on YouTube. And at one point, and then the other voice trick you can use is simply a pause. If you're about to make a really important point, you pause for a moment. You actually capture people's attention because they're waiting for what's at the end of the pause, and they have time to focus on you. In his story, Dhananjaya says, when a son hears his mother cry, he is ashamed. And that's a life-changing moment. But it's a very emotional statement. So when he says it, he puts a pause in there, and he's doing this in front of a live audience, but he says, when a son hears his mother cry, he is ashamed. And he leans forward with a pause. That is a life-changing moment. And he totally has your attention when he does that. Just even a pause or stepping forward, whether it's online or in person. Stepping forward can add emphasis. If you're about to make a really key point that you want people to remember and pay attention to, pause, make that point. You can lean forward. That'll help focus on that point. We talked about filler words a little bit, you know, like sort of, you know, like yesterday I was kind of like hungry. So I walked to the store and I was like super hungry when I got there. And so I went up to the deli and like I ordered 6 pizzas. A lot of likes, so's, kind of, and sort of even are terms that you want to not use. There's a few times if I'm sort of hungry, maybe then you're describing not so hungry, but sort of hungry. But people use it all the time. I have people say, I was sort of. That was beautiful. That was a different way to get people's attention. Anyway, so you want to try to avoid, in most cases, sort of, kind of. I was kind of getting ready to stand up and give a presentation. Well, you weren't kind of. You were getting ready to get up and give a presentation. So leave the kind of out of that statement. So that's another popular filler word that you just want to start recognizing if you're saying it and try to get it out of your vocabulary. Visual aids, I'll just want to say one thing about visual aids or props, whether you're going to bring a ball or, and Donna Jaya has a rose that he uses that you'll see. It needs to not distract from the points you're making. It needs to support. It needs to complement whatever are the messages that you are giving in your presentation. So you don't want it to be something that's distracting or that's going to take their mind off of your key point. You're talking about water purification and you want to hold up that glass of water, that's fine. You'll see in Donna Jaya, when he holds up the rose, it's right with the point that he's making. It's not something just added, not an added distraction. So we talked about, under creating your speech, the structure of the speech. So you have a very impactful introduction, something to grab your audience right up front. In the body of your speech, you'll have 3 to 5 supporting points. There's magic in the number 3. People will remember 3. And then you can summarize it in your closing. Either summarize your points if it's more of an educational presentation, but if it's something inspirational or persuasive, you're trying to persuade, maybe in the case of our water purification, you want to persuade your government leaders to take action, that summary is where you can emphasize that again. So don't forget to go out and whatever the action is that you're trying to motivate people to take. And then when you're delivering, you want to use gestures, but make them deliberate. You don't want to just be flailing. You don't want, if you have a habit, I worked with one young gentleman, he just had this hand and he would use it, and that's what he was comfortable with. Or it was just habit. I don't think he even realized he was doing it. So we had to point out to him, hey, don't, either hold your hand still or do some other things with it. But he just had that very repetitive movement. Use a mirror. If you're presenting, practice in front of a mirror or have somebody else watch your presentation for some of these things where they can point out either words you're using that you shouldn't or gestures that you're doing that you may want to be aware of and stop, like rocking. So your words are deliberate, your gestures are deliberate. Your voice inflection can be at very deliberate times. Use that pause and try to make a really important point. And practice, practice, practice. If you've got a big speech, big presentation coming up for work or with government leaders, anything that you really want to, you're giving that presentation because you want to have impact, practice it, and preferably have somebody give you feedback, watch it and give you feedback. And that, following just a few of these basic speaking practices can make you a more impactful speaker, more entertaining, and hopefully more memorable. You want people to remember what you're saying and take action based on it. We've got time for questions, and if we have time, I would love to even show you that presentation that Donna Jaya did on YouTube. I can share my screen. But I'll take any questions if anybody has questions.
Vă rog, dacă aveți întrebări, sunteți bineveniți. Okay, let's see if people can hear me because I think I don't have the interpret.
Yes, I have.
Don has a question. We have
I
a
don't
question
want-
from Danielle.
Yes, I don't want to seem disrespectful, but I'm just curious. Where did you learn about your? Where did you take your knowledge from? Like, did you take some courses or did you go to university?
Mostly from practicing at Toastmasters. When you give presentations at Toastmasters, you always have an evaluator. So you would give a 5-minute speech, and then you would have somebody come up and give you feedback and point out, here's a couple things you did really well. You had a real solid opening, had some good supporting points. I liked your use of humor, and you had good eye contact. However, and they would give you feedback, you may want to be aware, like you're rocking, or the ending was too short, too quick, too abrupt, and you need to have a better closing, whatever. But they give a lot of good feedback, and it's always good constructive feedback that you need to hear. So that's the main thing, is where I learned, was getting a lot of feedback from people at Toastmasters. And like I said, I've given some presentations at work, although at work people aren't apt to give you much feedback. They'll stand in the back of the room and say, boy, she could have done better if she had been doing this. But they won't tell you. It's a little more awkward at work.
Competition.
So you have to tell people, yeah, you have to tell people, please give me feedback. I want feedback. I've done that at work. And in fact, I've told people at work who are going to be giving a presentation, I said, if you want feedback, I will be happy to give it to you. If they don't ask, then I don't give them feedback, unless it's something, I don't know, it just depends on who they are. Maybe I guess I have a few times.
Okay, thank you.
Sandy, we have a question. I think you have mentioned a couple of resources, but Erica is also asking regarding the videos that you would recommend, and I think it's a good chance for us to actually view one of them.
Okay. Yeah, I can do that. Move this one up. Favorite video. I've watched it probably 100 times because I learned so much from him. Let's see. So if I share my screen.
Please, if you can share your screen, please do not forget to put the button so we can also hear the sound. There is a bullet. Yeah. Okay. I'm just wording because I forget that all the time. That's why.
I'm looking for that button. Oh, share sound. There it is. Yep. Okay. This Alicia Avoid
Yeah,
hearing
it's full
duplicated
screen. If you
audio.
could do full screen, it would be great because we can see the details. Okay, great.
Danajaya Hediarachi, I see something.
Can you hear him?
I see
Okay.
something. Danajaya Hediarachi.
Yes.
You and I are not very different from this flower. Just like this flower is unique, you are unique. All of us has something special that makes us as beautiful. Do you know what makes you special? Now the answer to that can be a little difficult to find, because sometimes life has a cruel way of picking out your petals, breaking you in two, and throwing you into the trash. And when you're broken, it's very difficult to feel special. Mr. Contest Chair, my fellow flowers, I can remember the first time I broke. I was 17 years old. I had already flunked high school and managed to get myself arrested. Now, I wasn't afraid of the cops, but there was one person I was very afraid of, and that was my mama. Raise your hand if you have an emotional mother. Let me see. Put them all together, you get mama. I can hear her scream outside the police station. Even the cops were afraid. She came up to me, held the iron bars, looked into my eyes, and I saw a tear coming down her face. Now I've seen my mama cry before, but mothers cry 3 types of tears. Tears of joy, tears of sorrow, and tears of shame. And when a son sees a mother cry tears of shame, that's a life-changing moment. She looked at me and said, "Son, I want you to be a better man." That night, when I drove home, my dad was waiting for me at home. Now, my dad is a cool dad. Raise your hand if you have a cool dad. Put them all together, you get my dad. My dad came up to me and said, "Son, it's okay. You flunked your exams. You already got arrested. That's fine. You get that from your mother's side. I want you to start working immediately." And I said, "Okay." So my dad took me to meet one of his friends called Sam. Now, Sam was an accountant who had an accounting firm and had generously decided to make me his personal assistant. And there he was. He looked like a teddy bear. But this man was special. I looked at him and he looked at me. And then he said the most amazing thing. He said, "Son, I see something in you, but I don't know what it is. If you decide to work with me, I can help you find that something." And I was like, "Whoa, that's the first time in my whole life somebody has ever told they see something in me." And I started working for Sam. And every day after work, he used to tell me stories about the world, about history, about culture, about philosophy. And it was much more interesting than what I learned in school. And I discovered I can dream. And I started dreaming, ladies and gentlemen. After 1 year, I went back into high school, completed my exams, and went into college. After successfully completing college, I found a great girl, but not a job. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. Have you ever had that problem? And when you're lost, it's difficult to feel special. So I went back to my cool dad. And I said, Dad, I feel lost. He said, you are like your mother. So my dad introduced me to this strange club that had a strange name, with strange people talking. On the first meeting, they told me to do something called a table topic. I aced it. But while I was speaking, I see a strange man seated in the back row, humble, simple, the unfailing quality of kindness in his eyes. As soon as I finished, he walked up to me, looked me dead straight in the eye, and said, son, I see something in you, but I don't know what it is. If you come here twice a month, maybe we can find that something. And ladies and gentlemen, I discovered I could speak, and I love speaking. And that led me to become a teacher. I know what it's like to not have enough money in your bank account. I know what it's like to worry when the bills start coming in. And sometimes, in the middle of the night, I wake up my beautiful wife and I ask her, honey, why did you marry me? She says, I saw something in you. But I still don't know what it is. Ladies and gentlemen, today I'm a dreamer, I'm a speaker, and I learned the unfailing quality of unconditional love from my wife. I was broken, and I've been broken, lost, and broke many times in my life. But the people in my life were able to reach into the trash can and make me whole again. If it was up to me, I would have never been able to do that. And this is why if you have great people in your life, no matter how broke, how lost, or how broken you become, they can piece you back together. Ladies and gentlemen, when I look at you, I see something in you. But I don't know what it is. Over to you.
It was a great presentation.
Yes, wasn't that good?
Yeah,
But you saw his
I loved
hands
it.
in the bars and the tears and the three types of tears, and everything was very deliberate in what he was doing. It was obviously well practiced. But yeah, that was his winning speech for the world champion of public speaking. And you could see how he used his voice. He used pauses. He was back and forth across the stage, but it wasn't like just watching a tennis match. He just wasn't randomly going back and forth. He would go over here and talk to his dad. And then he would go over here and he'd talk to Sam. And then he was so it was like he had places on the stage where he had each section of his presentation. It was just very, very good. Any questions?
Dacă mai aveți întrebări,
Eu am, dar eu o să am nevoie de traducere.
ok. Eu îmi traduc în engleză, Camelia.
Ok. Deci o să încep cu prezentarea ideii. Ideea noastră de business este a unui suc natural din fructe autohtone.
So I will start. My question is related actually to our pitch, and I will tell you a little bit about our business. We are focused on developing a company around the idea of producing natural juices.
Vreau să întreb, în momentul în care o să prezentăm ideea noastră și chiar prezentarea care o facem, când ar fi mai bine să prezentăm problema? În introducere sau în cuprins?
So basically, I would like to ask you, first of all, when do we start to present the problem? Do we start it within the introduction or actually go with the problem into the body of the presentation?
Good question.
Întrebare foarte
If-
bună, Camila.
Yeah, so in that case, you could, if the problem is, it was juicing again, right? So it's like a health issue or something. You could start out with the problem in the introduction. If it's like a story that you could tell, or maybe there's a surprising fact that 8 out of 10 people have this issue, blah, 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 and then go on to show how juicing would improve that or fix that. You guys are interpreting, okay. And yes, so you could consider doing it right up in the introduction, and then use it as your opening, and then jump right in, and then jump right into the body, where you're going to now explain how your product solves that issue. So yeah, you could use it right up in the beginning. There's so many different ways that I'm thinking that you could start a product presentation like that, and it could be a surprising fact up front. It could be if you have a reference, or what we call it at IBM, we have case studies, client stories. So here's a client that used it and got this fantastic result. If it's an amazing story, that would be a great way to open something that's going to really capture the attention of your listener, your audience.
Mulțumesc și eu mai am o întrebare. La fel, la început eu aș vrea
Thank you,
să...
and I will have another question related to that.
La început aș vrea să-mi prezint coechipierii și întrebarea mea este dacă ar fi mai bine, la fel, după ce le spun numele, să le spun și spun juriului și o mică istorioară despre ei.
And I'd like to also introduce my team at one point in time. And also, do you think I should tell about each one of them a small story to showcase them?
Yes, although I wouldn't open with that. It could even actually be more of your, like at the end. I wouldn't want to totally end with that. Your ending message should be your main selling point. Like, so when you leave here today, remember, here's what juicing can do for you, but whatever, something. So you want that to be that last message that they hear before they walk out the door. But maybe like you've given your opening and you've talked about the product. Before we leave, I want you to meet the people behind our product. Boom, boom, boom. Introduce them, and then finish it up with that final message. So you could do it toward the end. I say don't open with it. Don't have that be your opening, because it's introducing everybody is a kind of a slow way to open. You want that more catchy, attention-getting opening. But it is important to introduce your team and tell them that here's who's represented. See, I put a pen in my hand. What am I doing? I'm playing with the pen. Put the pen down.
It doesn't matter how much we know it. If we have it, we'll do it.
Yep.
Ok. Haideți să mai vedem dacă mai este. Mulțumesc, Evelina, întrebările foarte la temă. Dacă mai avem întrebări.
Nu.
Madalina?
Nu.
Thank you.
Cred că eu trebuie să adaug totuși un lucru. dacă echipa mea, de fapt, o să participe atunci când noi o să prezentăm produsul pe parcurs. Adică eu nu pot să-i prezint la sfârșit, așa cum eu o să am un cuvânt de introducere despre descrierea produsului, apoi toată informația care noi o să dăm o să fie deja, adică împărțită cu
So
echipieri.
what we will do during our presentation, we'll divide the presentation in a format that everybody is going to participate. So I will start with the introduction, and then the rest of the team is going to cover different parts. Continue.
Respectiv, adică întrebarea dacă ar trebui să-i prezint la început era legat de acest fapt.
So basically, if the question was related to the fact that we will start and then basically we'll do the presentation together, and maybe I should do it at the beginning. Okay. So I do have a say too as well for that, and actually it's going to be too much attention. Evelina, o să fie prea multă atenție la echipă. Tu poți la final să introduci toată echipa și să prezinți toți. Așa poți spui doar numele. So basically I was saying that if they start doing the presentation together, they can say only their names and then basically start with the presentation.
Okay,
Because,
thanks.
Yeah, and Sandy, what do you have in mind?
Yeah, you may have noticed when Dhananjaya was speaking, he came out and he did a little bit about the rose, and then he stopped and he said, Mr. Contest Chair, and he's called them the audience fellow flowers. So that was his way of saying good morning, or instead of starting out by saying, because you always address whoever just introduced you. That's what he was doing. He was saying he was in a contest. So he was saying, Mr. Contest Chair, fellow audience members. But rather than doing that right up front, he jumped right in with and caught your attention with his story about the flowers, and then said, Contest Chair, fellow flowers, and then went on with it. So that's very commonly done by a good presenter, where they'll jump right in before even introducing themselves. Jump right in and give that amazing opening, capture the attention, and then pause and say, audience members, let me tell you a little bit about my background, blah, 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 blah. And then they might introduce themselves, or let me tell you what I'm going to talk about today. But you've already captured their attention before you stop and do the introductions or the more formal, here's what I want to talk about today. And I think it's a great way.
I think it's
capture the attention right up front and then jump into it.
And it's also a very, very humble way of making the presentation more about the topic rather about the person.
Yeah. Good questions.
So, yeah.
Yeah, on any of these. So it sounds like you guys may have presentations that you're working on, or business proposals, things like that. I would make sure that to give them my email address. I'm happy to jump on a Zoom call and talk to you specifically about your presentation, or if you want to deliver your presentation to me, and I'm happy to give you feedback. I love doing that. You won't get more than about a minute into it, and I'm going to interrupt you and make you go back and do stuff again. But that's how we get better. But I love doing that.
Dacă vreți să utilizați orele astea de mentorat, puteți să luați legătură cu Sandy și ea vă oferi timp separat. Asta e important. I was saying the same in Romanian.
Yeah. Yeah. If you want to see more similar to Dhananjaya, you can go out and just go out to YouTube and search on World Champion of Public Speaking, and you'll have every speech of the last 20 years, it has been the award-winning ones. They usually have first, second, third place out there. But the other place to go and to watch presenters is the TED Talks that I talked about. Again, just search on YouTube for, you just put in TED, TED Talks. There's a zillion of them out there. There's just tons. And they all have to be kept within something about 17 minutes. They have to be, so they have to be between 15 and 20 minutes. They say and the ideal time is 17 minutes, because after that, your audience starts getting wiggly and they lose interest or whatever. So they're all short, but they're all really well done, really good.
Sean? So yeah, I think we are already a bit like 10 minutes past time because we took the 7-minute delay. If we do not have any questions, or if we have some last questions, please let us know. Dacă aveți întrebări, vă rog să le dați acum. O întrebare mai poate fi luată. Vă rog.
Eu mai am.
Evelina, hai să dăm șansa întâi, așteptăm. Mai are. I think she needs your mentorship. I think she's going to get Stefan and get your mentorship. Because ok, încă o întrebare aștept de la alții. Dacă nu vine, atunci îi ofer Evelinii posibilitatea. Deci, haideți să vedem. Elena, eu nu te limitez, dar încerc să ofer și altora posibilitatea. Iusti, Mădălin, Iulia, aveți întrebări?
Da, eu am o întrebare. Să o pun în română ca să fie mult mai clar, dumneavoastră o traduceți și așa mai departe.
Romanian, so it's going to be clear. Okay?
Așa, ce se întâmplă dacă fie noi avem o prezentare online sau offline, în fața publicului sau în fața calculatorului, dacă ne pierdem, cum putem trece peste acest
How to deal
necaz?
with the fact that we can get blocked, either presenting online or offline? How to deal with the blockages? How to remove them?
Blockages, what kind of blockages?
Blockages when we lose like either anxiety driven or any type of blockages that can prevent us from delivering a good speech. How to deal with those type of emotions so they don't happen to us?
Oh, your own.
Yes.
Your own.
Either it's online or
nervous.
offline. What would be a trick to help with the blockages? Maybe your trick and I can share mine.
Sure. Yeah, I would say, like, if you lose your place, or if you're stumbling in some way, or I don't know, whatever the issue is, mostly just stop. It's okay to take a couple of deep breaths and get your thoughts back again, and then proceed. Don't apologize. I'm sorry, I'm losing my place, I got to get back. Don't say any of that. Just stop, take a deep breath, and regroup and start again.
Mm-hmm.
Much better to have a few moments of silence.
Yeah, I can share my trick. Should I share it in English or Romanian? Okay, I'll do English. So what I do usually when I feel that I'm going to get anxious or blocked, I usually straighten my spine and feel like a golden thread goes from my feet directly to the sun, and I breathe and I can see that ray of light coming through me, and then I count backwards. 10, 9, 8 with the music. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. I landed back.
That's great. Yep. But mostly just pause.
Yeah, straighten. It's important to be straight for me. It's like,
Yeah. I'll make one last comment on using notes or memorizing your presentation, because depending on your audience or how long your presentation is or what the subject material is, sometimes you have to use notes. Sometimes you just want to use notes because it's a crutch. You don't want to, because you're afraid you're going to forget. Even if you have to use notes, I would encourage you memorize that opening and preferably your closing as well, but most important, your opening. Memorize that opening so that you're staring right at your audience, either online or you're in person. You're talking directly to them. You've engaged with them. Then when you have to pick up notes and look at notes during your presentation, they will be more forgiving because you've already caught their attention. You've already got them engaged right up front. And the fact that you have to look through notes toward the middle, it won't be a problem. But if you're reading your introduction, that's that first impression that they're going to go, oh boy, she's going to read her notes the whole time. You can at least get that solid introduction with no notes. They'll forgive you for having to have the notes in the body. And then again, the closing, because that's your final time to engage directly with your audience, give them that memorable message that you want them to go away with. If you can do all that looking right at them without having to just read it to them, makes a huge difference.
If I may, and I would like to also share some of the things that actually can prepare you. I can do it in Romanian, and Camelia, or vice versa. Camelia is going to translate into Romanian. Okay, so we do it in Romanian. I do think that's a good, still have time for preparation, and there is a magic of things. And I believe in the magic of hours. And the magic of notes. So what I do 24 hours before, actually, when I draft my presentation, so I have a presentation, I usually draft points and its structure. So what would be the intro? One. Second, what would be the body? What would be the main points that I want to make in the body? So it's in a written form. Actually, that's a skill that my mom taught from very early age, to write everything down. And the conclusion. What would be the conclusion? So the other thing that I do usually, after 24 hours, I go through those notes, I interpret them, and then I go with the new emotions. And then after 8 hours prior to the presentation, I actually read the notes only, just reading the notes. And in the morning of the presentation, what I do, I actually learn from a vocal coach. I actually exercise my voice with a song or 2 or 3 in the language I'm going to speak. What it allows me to use my pitch of voice. So to go into the lows, into the belly lows, and to go into the highs, because I'm not very strong. Usually men are worse with the highs and women are better with the highs. So for me, it's like going into the highs is harder, because when I get emotional, I go low. So I go into my belly and find my voice. So, but I try to use that pitch of voice so I can actually articulate and speak with emotion and speak with persuasion. So actually the 8 hours reading the notes is really helpful. It helps me with memory. And the morning singing, and I know Marina has attested to my singing no skills. It helps me with exercising my voice and actually using my voice during presentations. And I know that Yusti and Madalena is singing better than me, definitely. But that actually helps me with the voice.
Yeah, the voice exercises is a really good idea. I think if you just Google, you will find examples of la 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 la, or whatever the different. I have a good friend that does that. She teaches that, and she's come to some of our meetings and had us run us through all the different ups and downs to stretch our voice. She said it's like just a muscle.
Definitely, but it's also when you connect with the emotion of something that you like, with the song that you like, you are connecting to the type of presentation you want to make. So if you know you're going to have a really dramatic presentation, you're going to use that dramatic song, because that's the type of voice you need that. So I'm going to rock if I'm going to do a dramatic presentation. Or if I have to go for a really sad story, then I'll sing sad songs. Okay. Madalena is saying that there are exercises for diction.
Sorry, trying to turn off Dhananjaya. Yeah.
So I can turn off the YouTube streaming. And if we have one more question, Yusti, thank you for the question. Yulia, do you have any questions? Diana, ai vreo întrebare? Erica, I know you can't speak because you are sick today, but thank you for the question. Valentin, maybe you have a question, poate tu ai o întrebare? So Madalena has a question. Madalena?
Yeah, what do you usually do to get rid of anxiety before having a presentation?
Well, first of all, know that even the most experienced, practiced speakers sometimes have that anxiety before they go out. I can tell you, Dhananjaya came and did some teaching for us, and he said, even still, when he's having to get up and give a presentation or something that's really important to him, he may still feel those butterflies in his stomach, and that comes mostly just from practice. The more you do it, the less it's going to bother you. It may still be there. I still get a little nervous before I'm going to be giving a presentation, and I think, am I really ready? Do I know what I'm doing? Probably not 100%. But you recognize that I often feel this way, and yet I do fine. And so you learn for yourself that even though you're feeling that nervousness, everything goes fine. In the end, it'll all be fine. And so you just learn to not let it bother you or not let it stop you. Again, maybe some of those exercises, voice exercises, can help relax you a little bit. The music, like Alicia was suggesting, something to help you calm down a little bit. But mostly know that it'll be fine. It will. And that comes with practice. Find a place, whether it's at work or Toastmasters or your sister or brother who will sit and listen to you. Find a place to practice and get used to speaking in front of people. To take opportunity to do that. If they're looking for a volunteer at work and everybody else is like, no, not me, do it and get that exercise, get that practice.
Thank you, Madalena. Okay, Evelina, do you still have the question?
Nu, a fost aceea care a dat-o Iusti, doar că a fost legat, eu mai mult am avut în vedere pe partea de timp, pentru că adică în acelea 5 minute care să le avem, de exemplu, putem să fim concentrați la început și să ne pierdem pe parcurs.
Okay.
I have a question.
Valentin, yes. Could you turn on the camera if possible so we can see you as well?
Sure. Like before we need to present the product, we need to make a speech or we need to improvise?
It's better to actually make the presentation. it's about the business and the product, it's better to make a presentation. We do have some suggestions, and I can send you the links to the structure of the presentation that we recommend. Okay?
Thanks.
You're welcome. It was more of the organizational, so it's how the presentation should be structured. Valentina, I can send you a link for you to connect to that, and also give you access to the presentation there. Just a second, let me generate a link, and then basically I'll send it to you and you can share with your colleagues. Okay?
Yeah, thanks.
So, just a second. Okay, other questions? Când eu generez link-ul pe WhatsApp. I'm sending the link here. You can connect directly from here. Hold on.